this episode, I'll be taking pictures of birds on the Galapagos Islands.
Adorama TV presents Exploring Photography with Mark Wallace, where you will learn innovative techniques on shooting a wide range of photography. Here's your host.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Exploring Photography right here on Adorama TV. It's brought to you by Adorama, the camera store that has everything for photographers. Well, I'm going to be spending the next couple of weeks on the Galapagos Islands. Today I'm on the Santa Cruz Island and I'm shooting some birds, taking pictures of birds here. And I posted a few of the results I got from a couple days ago on my Facebook page, and I got a ton of questions. And so I want to explain how I got the results that I got. Now you can see here that the birds that I shot previously all have they're really frozen. And to achieve that, what you need is a really fast shutter speed, but you also need to make sure that those birds are in focus. And so I want to talk to you about those two things, freezing motion and focusing. Now I want to start by talking about the lens that I'm using. This is a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8L lens. It's a really high-end lens, and the difference between a lens that has a fixed aperture of 2.8 and a variable aperture that changes when you zoom in and zoom out is the focusing speed. This will focus anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times as fast as a lower end lens. And so I've got a lot of questions saying, hey, this is a very, very expensive lens. Can I get the same results with a less expensive lens? You can get the same results, but it's going to be much more difficult for you to focus as quickly as this lens does. So don't beat me up about having such an expensive lens. It really does make a difference, but you can get results that are similar using a less expensive lens, maybe a 70 to 300 millimeter lens. All right, so that's the lens that I'm using. The camera here, this is a 5D Mark III, and what I've done here is I have actually put this on aperture priority mode. Now that sounds totally counterintuitive because you're thinking, well, you want a really super fast shutter speed, why aperture priority mode? Well, I've put my aperture at 2.8, so my aperture is as wide as it's going to go, and what that's going to do is force my shutter to be extremely fast. And so with the really bright sunlight right here, that's going to keep my shutter really, really fast, so I don't really have to worry about it. And because I have a 2.8 aperture, that means that I'm going to have really shallow depth of field, and that's going to isolate the bird as I'm shooting. Now the other thing I want to do here is set my focus to AI servo on other cameras. It's called continuous focus mode. And what that does, instead of when I push my shutter release button, instead of locking on a subject and holding that, it is always focusing. So as those birds are moving, I'm going to be tracking them, and the focus is going to be tracking them as well. And then the last thing that I've done here is I put my camera's drive mode into high speed continuous. So when I push the shutter release, you can hear it. It's going to take them a bunch of pictures really, really fast, and that just improves my chances of getting a winning picture. Now, I'm not going to be using a tripod because things are going to be moving around, so what I'll do is I'll put my autofocus point to the center autofocus point. That's the fastest, by the way, autofocus point on your camera. And then what I'll do is I will track the birds just like I'm going to maybe shoot them with a gun. That's a horrible thing to say, but I'll track those birds, and then I'll be shooting as they fly. And then, if I don't get a perfect composition, I can always crop in post-production to make sure everything is right. That's all there is to it. Use the best lens that you can possibly get, preferably a 2.8 fixed aperture lens. I chose the 70 to 200 millimeter. Shoot in aperture priority mode at 2.8 or a wide aperture, depending on how bright it is outside. Make sure your focus is on continuous or AI servo, and then set your drive to high speed so you can get everything. So I'm going to shoot a couple of birds around here, and then we'll come back and talk about one more thing before we go. Well, part of taking photos of birds, it's a waiting game, and so I'm waiting for some of these birds to fly by, and you never know what you're going to get. There's a guy right there. No, he flew behind a tree. And so be patient when you're shooting any kind of wildlife. You never know what they're going to do. You have to sort of camp out, and when you see the shot, be ready to take it. In fact, here's a guy coming up right here. I'm going to just track him. Perfect, here he comes. And that's how, oh, look at this guy. Yeah, that's how it works. You have to make sure that your camera is always ready to go because you never know what happens. So I've got my everything preset, and as soon as I see something, I can go ahead and shoot. So let's keep going and see what kind of shots we get. Hey, I just want to remind you that Adorama has some terrific contests. You can win great prizes. So click on the link and enter the contest today. Another tip about shooting wildlife is just always be on your toes. I was shooting the birds, but we looked down and there was this lizard swimming around and climbing on the ropes and eating some stuff off this boat. And so I was able to shoot some extra bonus pictures. And so that's something you might be looking for birds, but then who knows, maybe an elk or something is going to come out of the woods if you're in North America. So make sure that you pay attention to other things around you. You don't want to miss a great opportunity. I mentioned earlier that I didn't use a tripod when I was shooting the birds because I need a lot of mobility. Well, sometimes you need a little bit extra stability, specifically when you're using a lens that doesn't have image stabilization, and this one does not. And so the thing I love about my Travel Angel by Benro is that I can convert it from a tripod to a monopod. And so what I'll do here is I'll just take this center column, it comes right out, and then this side leg here just comes right off. And then what I can do is, instead of using a normal tripod, these two things here put together, and now I've got myself a nice monopod, and that will give me a lot of freedom of movement, plus it'll give me the stability that I need to make sure that I don't have any kind of vibrations from my camera. And so that's something that you can do if you're looking for a great travel tripod. This is the one that I use specifically because it's lightweight and you can do things like this. Well, thanks for joining me today for Exploring Photography. I hope that you learned a few things about shooting things that move. In fact, the stuff that we shot today, the birds, it could be anything. It could be runners, it could be motorcycles, it could be cyclists, it can be anything that moves. The principles all are the same. You want to use a great lens. You want to make sure that your camera is set to continuous or AI servo focus mode, a high-speed drive, and then to get that shallow depth of field, open up your aperture wide, and that'll force your shutter to go really, really fast, and that's going to freeze motion. Thanks again for joining me today, and don't forget that you can subscribe to Adorama TV so you don't miss a single episode. So do that right now, and I'll see you next time.
Do you want great looking prints at low cost? Be sure to visit our easy to use online printing service. Adorama Pix has professionals who treat your images with the utmost care that you can count on. For a quick turnaround on photos, cards, or albums, use AdoramaPix.com.